So I'm happy to come in and share my screen here. Everybody can see the slides, I think.
Yes, let me see.
Great. So what I want to talk about are the two puzzle pieces that solve our mental health crisis, and then dive into some details as to how this works. What I will mention is that I have a background in neuroscience. So most recently, I was a principal investigator at the Zurich Psychiatric Hospital. And my work there focused on how the circuits that underlie our motivation to explore turn out to be very important for not just the efficiency of cognitive processes like learning, but also in our overall mental health. And that was the primary work that I was doing as a neuroscientist. And it's this work that then led me to starting a company in this space. But what we're really here to talk about today is these two things that are coming together. This is a special moment in history because there are two market forces, and we all know that the markets drive change more than anything else. One is that mental illness is now the global priority in healthcare. Governments all around the world are starting to rethink about the importance of the mental health of populations, from economic standpoints, to healthcare standpoints, to the contribution of mental health to many other types of diseases. And the second thing which is happening is that digital therapy, the ability to deliver medicine through smartphones and other scalable tools, is becoming now an accepted class of medicine. And that's really, really core to solving the mental health crisis. And it really is a crisis, and it's our greatest crisis right now. If you look economically, mental illness is $16 trillion per year in treatment costs, as well as lost economic opportunity. And these are numbers from 2016. Even more importantly, the contribution of mental illness to loss of life and loss of life quality has been increasing relative to all other types of diseases for decades now. And COVID-19 has exacerbated this issue. However, we feel at Mobio Interactive, I think as other people do in this conference, is that this is suffering that is largely unneeded. There are things we can do in the here and now to offset this burden. We just need to take action, and action is thankfully being taken. I want to emphasize again that every economy on earth is looking at mental illness. This includes even the low and middle income economies that typically considered mental illness to be a bit of a luxury health item. But it turns out that mental illness is vitally important to every human, no matter what your economic status. And so there's a huge push now from a lot of governments in order to address this issue, because it's big and it's going to cripple economies, and it's one of the most effective ways to really assist with your population. And so just to summarize a few of the important things that everybody knows here. The problem is very big. This is something we all understand. The current standards of care are not enough. If they were, then we wouldn't be in such a crisis. And there's different issues for all of them. Pharmacotherapy, for example, has very negative side effects. Psychoanalysis, great technique, often works very well for people, but it cannot scale. Another thing which is very obvious is that ultimately everybody is affected. But right now we have close to 1 billion people on the planet that directly suffer from mental illness. And what that means is that there's going to be people close to them who are affected indirectly. But this is truly a global thing which affects every single individual on the entire planet. But the last thing that I think we overlook often, and something that Paul really helped to highlight in the first talk today, is that everyone is affected in a very unique way. There is no one mental illness. And even look at how mental illnesses are diagnosed and written down. My colleagues at the psychiatry hospital in Zurich don't even care if somebody has schizophrenia or depression or bipolar, what the label might be. But they look at what are the symptoms and what is the issue for this individual, and then they work on providing treatment that's best for that individual. And just to emphasize this, it's really our brains that make us unique. we can identify individuals based on the fingerprint, and the complexity of a fingerprint is nothing compared to the complexity of the brain. Often the brain is described as the most complex system in the known universe. And therefore, we understand that every single brain that's out there is unique and actually extremely unique on multiple unimaginably large numbers of ways. And because of that, the experiences that we have, how mental illness affects us, how therapy will affect us, will always be unique. So this means that we need to have therapies. The solution for mental illness at the global scale must be something which is scalable and must be something which is personalized at the same time. This is the conundrum. How do you bring these things together? We already know that psychotherapy, one-to-one therapy sessions cannot be scaled. Wonderful, great practices, but we know that that's just mathematically impossible. And of course, pharmacotherapy is not personalized. You can imagine maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even 100 different drugs, but that's not going to treat the billion of different mental illness situations that we have around the world right now. So we can achieve scalability through software. One example of that is OmDTX, which is a digital health platform created by my company, Mobio Interactive. And the way that it's delivered is healthcare providers give patients access to a web page. They go in and they put in their login details, and they use the same login details to access the app that they download onto their phone. And then this app can deliver specific courses for their specific mental illness and then adapt over time to learn who they are. So this scalability can really be achieved by delivering medicine through the phone, something that nearly every individual on the planet already has. Personalization, on the other hand, can be developed through this measure, treat, measure system that we have mastered at Mobio Interactive, where we encourage the patients to do a very quick 2-minute pre-measurement, self-assessment of how they're feeling. Also included in this is a 30-second video scan that allows us to obtain some objective data. And I'll highlight what this is in a second. Then they undergo a therapy session. And this therapy session could be any variety of things. Primarily what we have delivered at Mobio Interactive are meditative-based practices, mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based recovery for cancer patients, mindfulness-based approaches to mindful eating for people with obesity, mindfulness-based programs in order to prevent postpartum depression and help bonding with children, a lot of meditative practices. We also deliver music therapy and are pushing into self-hypnosis, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, binaural beats, all types of different therapies that can be delivered at scale through a phone. Then the patient finishes, wraps up this session with a post-measurement. And by taking these pre and these post measures, by doing this measure, treat, measure type of gamified system, we're able to figure out what therapy sessions are most effective for each individual and what other factors might be important, morning versus afternoon versus evening, for example, how long the session is, for example. All this type of information we can then learn for each individual and then create these personalized programs. One of the tools that we use is a very simple tool to analyze somebody's mood according to their arousal, level of arousal, and their level of valence. And these are the 2 aspects of something that's called affect, which is what neuroscientists and psychologists determine as emotion. So we look at emotion in individuals by allowing them to just select the words that work for how they feel in the here and now. And each of these words has a point that's hidden to the user, but has a point associated with it. And then that allows us to get in a measure of mood. And we've done the benchmarking to show how this correlates to medical questionnaires that are currently the standard for assessing somebody's mood in the here and now. We have a very similar type of, at least similar in case of its simplicity, tool in order to assess somebody's self-assessment of stress. And here they just use a stress slider to indicate, do I feel no stress? Or do I feel extreme stress? And this we have also then benchmarked to psychological questionnaires that are used to assess stress in a medical context. And then we also allow individuals to write in some notes. In the cases of our clinical trials, we use this as a way to identify people that might be at risk for suicide so that we can intervene. But it also opens up a possibility for natural language processing to understand a little bit about how people are feeling and doing. And what we have been able to accomplish by providing these types of tools to individuals is a really special data set specifically designed with mental health in mind. And so we now have over 25,000 unique individuals that are contributing millions of data points for us from over 175 nations. And in addition to these self-assessment tools that I've just described, these individuals are also completing selfie videos, these 30-second selfie videos. And what's really powerful about that is that the people on our platform tend to be people who are experienced in meditation. They have an idea for what stress means, what their emotions are. They can provide an accurate picture, more accurate than the average individual anyway, about how their states are. And we then have used this data to then correlate to digital biomarkers. We pull out digital biomarkers from the face, including heart rate and heart rate variability, and we use these assessments that our population of individuals have done in order to then create neural networks that are able to objectively predict how people are doing. And what we've progressed along so far is developing a neural network that can accurately quantify somebody's stress, particularly looking at the balance within the autonomic nervous system with nothing more than a 30-second selfie video that comes from their smartphone. It beats any other algorithm that's currently out there of stress via heart rate variability. And this is a very powerful tool that is allowing us to make really strong headway. Materials are least affect each individual, but also in obtaining objective demonstrate that we have developed is true. We're also pushing possible in terms of objective assessments. So right now, we have this great tool to assess stress, but we're pushing even harder by measuring distribution of blood in the face, by measuring the musculature around the eyes, because this is the area of the face that provides the most emotional context for individuals. In order for us to identify a triple axis understanding of brain health, where stress is on one axis, valence and arousal on the other two axes, valence and arousal being the two important domains of somebody's emotion. And all this within under 30 seconds from a standard mobile camera, so truly available at scale. And we believe that through this triple axis, we'll have a very good understanding for how somebody is doing. And this will truly allow us to then personalize the content that everybody receives. We, of course, run clinical trials to demonstrate that our software is truly effective. We've completed 3 different randomized controlled trials at present and have many more in the pipeline. And just to highlight 3 of the indications where we have clinical validation so far: in generalized anxiety, patients that use OMDTX for 4 weeks in a special program that we designed for them was able to reduce their anxiety 3 months after the intervention was delivered, as well as 6 months after, so a lasting effect. For chronic stress, what we can show is measurements that are done in real time as they interact with the product. And what we see here is a decrease from before they engage in a therapy session to after they engage in the therapy session, showing their stress going down. But then also over the course of the trial, we see stress going down and the impact increasing. So long-term sustained effect, as well as an acute effect on individual stress. The first one is a reduction in somebody's stress directly, but the other, this long-term effect, is really an impact on somebody's resilience to stress and their capacity to reduce their stress on demand through various techniques, such as the ones that Eve took us through at the beginning of her session. And we're also doing a lot of work with cancer patients now. A cancer diagnosis is extremely stressful, as is the treatment that is undergone, as is the the reintegration back into the post-cancerous life. And one of the main measures for how cancer patients are doing during their recovery period is how much fear they have of the cancer coming back. And by delivering psychotherapy through OMDTX as a digital platform, we've been able to reduce the amount of fear that cancer patients have in a sustained way. And that's very important. And we have more clinical data coming out. In fact, we have a whole variety of medical indications where we are treating stress, anxiety, and psycho-oncology being three clinicians. But we're also exploring pediatric traumatic brain injury, and working with children that have concussion, major depression, and associated with this, the depressive episodes with bipolar disorder, pediatric eating disorders, postpartum depression. And there really is no limit in terms of the types of mental illnesses as well as neurological disorders that we can treat digitally. And it's only a matter of time before we're able to reach them all. And of course, we are working with fantastic institutions around the world in order to provide a global platform that is effective for people regardless of their ethnicity. One really important thing that we're focusing on is understanding how is the brain actually affected. So in addition to providing clinical validation that says, look, this works. We are the first company to ever show that a meditation app can outperform placebo. And that was an important first step. But now we're going even further, and we're identifying the mode of action through which these materials work. Just as Eve earlier was discussing about how brain imaging studies have been done and some of the techniques that she uses, we are doing similar things with our software in order to show that using an app for a sustained period of time can have long-term impacts on the function of the brain. And not just some change, but the specific change. And we make our predictions in real time. Shown here is a diagram that we've created in order to highlight the changes to the default mode network that occur from focused attention. But we're now building up a huge library for all the interventions that we create. So we create therapy sessions, typically in the studio, working with clinical psychologists, mindfulness guides, and other types of psychological professionals. We deliver this to people around the world in 6 different languages so far, over 1,000 different sessions. And we do the measurements before and after how they're doing in order to understand what content is effective and get hints as to what areas of the brain may be affected. And then we run clinical trials where we do proper brain imaging to understand what is actually going on in the brain as a result of engaging in these practices. And identifying the mode of action is very important for us, increasing our capacity to actually have impact, but it's also extremely important for getting the medical community on board. It's one thing to show clinical validation, and then people say, great, that's enough to even get you FDA approval because you can show it's safe and effective. But what really will turn heads, what really gets all of the physicians on board, as well as the healthcare providers on board, is an understanding for how this stuff works. Because when you start to understand how it works, the whole question about whether or not there's a confound involved in the clinical trial, et cetera, becomes mute, because we have this understanding for how things work. It's extremely powerful to show people what's really going on in the brain as a result of engaging in therapy through a digital platform like OMDTX. And of course, because we do measurements, we can see, well, what actually happens for people in the real world. We take data from over 10,000 OMDTX users, and we see this very strong reduction in stress, this boost in mood, and these long-term impacts that we're able to have on people. If we look at just on average, how does content affect people? Or we see that over 99% of the individuals who are engaging with the platform self-report a reduction in stress on average as a result of engaging in therapy. And the neural network, which objectively quantifies stress, also shows a very high number, 96.7. But note, these numbers are not the same. And this highlights the importance of the objective measures, because there's actually about 1 in 30 people who are engaging with the content on our platform who are having an increase in their stress. And that might not be surprising. Meditative practices can be very difficult to achieve early on, and it can be a stressful experience. And very often we see people's stress levels increasing at the beginning when they use our platform, and then start to decrease afterwards. It's very exciting to witness that in real time. Another important thing is for us to be legitimized. So we're undergoing the regulatory procedures for OMDTX and the interventions contained within through the FDA, through the European Medicines Agency, as well as in Asia and Australia. We're really pushing forward with this. We've already obtained health formulary approval. There are specific platforms that vet digital interventions like ours, and we are very much the clinical benchmark for other platforms in our class, according to ORCA, which is an important health formularity based in the UK. We work with partners, all kinds of partners, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, as well as hospitals and other types of healthcare providers. And to date, there are over 10 million fully or partially covered lives, as in individuals that are able to obtain access to our digital interventions and receive partial or full reimbursement for that from their healthcare insurers. The ultimate aim is to have digital therapies like OMDTX completely integrated within the global healthcare economy. That is absolutely necessary. Just as people don't expect to have to pay for their cancer treatment, people should not have to pay for their mental health therapy. It's something that we can deliver to them very cost effectively through a phone in a personalized way, but the tab should be picked up by the insurers or by governments and really be part of the global healthcare economy because it pays dividends. And so I just want to close by mentioning that where there is great crisis, as there is right now in mental illness, there is also great opportunity. This is truly a phenomenal opportunity for us to address mental illness at a global scale. And I just want to highlight one participant from a clinical trial, one of our early clinical trials that we completed with young adults that suffer from anxiety. And he comes in and he says, I was able to control my anxiety. I've worked with therapists, I've used numerous apps. This is the first thing that really clicked with me. We believe it's our emphasis on measurements, personalization, that allows for this type of response from patients. And so I'm very much looking forward to the discussion that we have at the end of this. And I just want to highlight how my mission of Mobio Interactive is to really create a world where we have effective and accessible healthcare for every human. Thank you.